And I will now start, I will now call to order the meeting of the Transgender Equity Council Policy Subcommittee for September 27th. And I will call the roll to verify the presence of a quorum. Melissa Berner.
Here.
May Brooks.
Yep.
Davis Sensman.
Here.
And Kenzie Weller.
Here.
Awesome. Let the record reflect that there is a quorum. And the first item we have on the agenda is kind of debriefing how the recommendations presentation went and then starting to talk through next steps. Kenzie, do you want to talk a little bit about the presentation? Not to put you on the spot, but since you and Hunter presented it, and then we can start to go into like the meetings with council offices that have happened and so on.
Do we have to move to adopt the agenda and accept minutes?
Whoops. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm out of it this week.
That's okay. Just
yes,
checking.
first we need a motion to adopt today's agenda and last month's minutes.
Okay, sure. I move to adopt today's agenda.
Do you want to do the minutes together with it so we only have to vote once?
With the minutes, I'm so sorry. This is May Brooks. I move to adopt the agenda and the last recorded minutes, meeting minutes.
Great.
I second this motion.
Amazing. Melissa.
Here. Yes.
May.
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Kenzie.
Yes.
Amazing. There are 4 in favor, 2 absent, none opposed. The motion passes. Thank you. Now let's move on to Kenzie letting us know how the presentation went.
Yes. Okay. So let's see. Last Wednesday, we gave a little presentation to City Council, me and Hunter, to, I mean, if you've read our recommendation document, it's essentially a script that we read word for word to council, and I don't think there were any last minute edits or anything, but immediately after our presentation, actually, council member Schrader, now I'm a little fuzzy on exactly what he did, but did he like propose to get moving on the like at least one gender neutral restroom in all new builds?
Actually slightly different. So he brought forward a staff direction, which is essentially like a formal instruction from council that staff from certain offices have to do something to bring together staff from all the relevant departments to form a work group to research the like feasibility implementation process of requiring that all single stall bathrooms in city buildings are gender neutral. Okay,
yes.
And I can say that again more slowly if that would be helpful. Okay, I'm gonna say that again more slowly based on that nod. So he brought forward a staff direction, instruction to staff, that staff from all the relevant departments, finance, attorney's office, civil rights, community planning and economic development, etc., come together to research the feasibility of the legal implications of the process of the city hopefully requiring that all single stall restrooms in city permitted buildings are made gender neutral.
Okay.
Yeah, so my apologies on that. I was getting confused with, I think, like a bullet point before that, but yes. So yeah, it was very cool to see action on that literally immediately after our presentation. And we also got a lot of good feedback about our recommendations in how they were specific and just specific, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just the way we formatted everything.
Mhm.
But, and I forget which council member said this exactly, but they said that our recommendations should be like a model for other boards and commissions to give their recommendations as well. So basically, we did a great job, and I'm very, very proud of us. And I don't think there were any questions or any concerns raised at that time.
No. When Councilmember Schroeder brought forward his staff direction, CVP Jenkins was kind of like, we could also use the trans issues work group for this. That already exists. And I feel like that was the biggest question that was raised, was like, what internal mechanism are we using to do this? And I'm following up with her to talk through what makes sense and if there is capacity in the issues work group or if this needs to happen more outside of that. But I don't think, I don't remember anyone asking like detailed questions to you all.
Perfect. Yeah, and then I think though our presentation is over, we are still, well, after we presented, that reminded a lot of council members that TRAC reached out and asked for kind of like one-on-one meetings with council members or staff so we could talk through recommendations individually. So right off the top of my head, I'm thinking about there's a tentative meeting with Councilmember Palmisano where we will be essentially going more in depth with those recommendations and kind of the concerns or questions that she has, just talking through that. So yeah, all in all, our recommendations went really well. And yeah, I think we wanted to we wanted to use this meeting to talk about when we have these kind of follow-up meetings with council members. It's just a very critical time in the election kind of process where, you know, the outgoing folks, or maybe they don't even know if they're gonna be outgoing or reelected, but they're trying to get a lot of stuff done to make themselves look good and things like that. So just a very critical time, and I know we wanted to talk about what recommendations do we want to focus on, what kind of things do we really want to push for, and yeah, so I know we were going to talk a little bit about that.
Does anyone have any questions for Kenzie before I talk more about some of the meetings we've had so far with council? If not, I will just give a couple more updates on like what is currently moving that there's already space to take action on. And then we can kind of use the rest of this time to figure out like, okay, strategically, what are the other next steps? But as we said, one thing is that staff direction around bathrooms. Council will officially vote on the staff direction at the next council meeting. Staff directions take one extra council cycle so that they can be like fleshed out in more detail. But that should move forward, no problem. I and often at least one other member of the TEC, either one of the co-chairs or a constituent of that ward, have met with a couple of the council offices already. With Ward 1, Councilmember Reich, Ward 2, Councilmember Gordon, Ward 10, Council President Bender, Ward 4, Councilmember Cunningham, Ward 8, CVP Jenkins, Ward 11, Councilmember Schroeder, and Ward 12, Councilmember Johnson, either with them directly or with one of their staff. And so we've learned a couple other interesting things in terms of like what it'll take to move some of the recommendations forward. And I'm going to kind of summarize those as well so we can pull from all of that to start thinking through next steps with the hopes that you all can bring some sort of a like, not like proposal, but like more thought through idea of where to maybe go next to the next TEC meeting. So one thing we heard was on the tenant opportunity to purchase ordinance, which some of you all were on the TEC when staff came to present on it, but a like very high level summary for folks who weren't on the TEC yet. It would essentially allow when a developer goes to, or when a landlord property owner goes to sell a building that is currently being rented out, the tenants would have the first right of first refusal, first opportunity to purchase the building before it gets sold to a developer, and they maybe lose access to renting there. It is not really moving forward right now, because there is kind of a tension between two ways it could be done, one that would give the tenants much more power than the other, and not enough clarity in terms of which of those policies the city is trying to draft, and therefore staff have not been instructed to draft it. What I heard from Councilmember Gordon is that things that would be useful are like just council members hearing community impatience about how long the process is taking, a kind of like, can you get this moving forward, please? And specifically community voice saying, we want the more thorough version that is more helpful to renters. And then it would be useful to get a read on the perspectives of all of the council members, have their constituents contact them and see which version of the ordinance they're supportive of. Because Councilmember Gordon was like, I don't actually know what the votes are yet. Like, I don't know who would vote which way yet. I don't know where that's at. So that is one, in terms of next steps on moving forward, one of your recommendations, that is kind of the concrete piece that was spelled out to me there. I'm going to pause and see if anyone has any questions on that or like things they would want to see the TEC do with that. With, I guess, part of the question being like the things he proposed of getting TEC folks to contact their council members and say, we're interested, we recommended this, what's your vote? Is that something you want to bring to the TEC as a suggestion?
I'm in favor. I think this could be one of those things where we even come up with like a little script. So it's like nobody even has to think, but it's like, you know, call and leave a message saying like, we support this, thanks. As we see with other actions too, you know, calling your local representative is very helpful in that way. So I think that could be something that we do.
I've been trying to figure out what we do and don't need to vote on in subcommittee meetings. So this is partially me thinking, but I'm wondering if it's worth like proposing that as an action to take forward and propose to the TEC. I think that is technically a thing that requires a vote. I don't have a ton of clarity on subcommittee voting, transparently.
Okay, so here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing is you're taking a recommendation from us to committee, correct? That's what you're doing. You're saying this is our great idea, and we're taking it to committee, right?
Yeah, just taking it to the full TEC.
Then you're fine. When you get over there, that's when you need the vote.
Great. Okay.
And if it's coming straight from committee, if I remember correctly, then you don't have to have a vote on there to like hear it. It's just a matter of you can take it right over there. That's how we did our job.
Great. Thank you, May, for knowing the rules better than me. That can just be a proposal that comes forward to the TEC in October then, unless anyone feels opposed to it for any reason. Great. So that's one piece then. Another update I got, so Ward 10 let me know about a policy that's coming forward that I was not aware of called Right to Counsel, which ensures that low-income renters who are going into eviction court get access to legal counsel, which is not currently the case. There is a public hearing for it this Thursday, and just the Ward 10 staffers were basically just like, if anyone wants to testify and is available Thursday afternoon, the public hearing is going to start somewhere after 1:30. It's always a little unclear where things will be in a council committee agenda, as Kenzie knows from waiting multiple hours to present last week. But if anyone is available to testify for that, that is just one direct ask that they made. It's not something that was in your recommendations because I did not know about it until they told me, I think, last week, but wanted to flag that for you all if you are interested. And if you are, I can get you the link to sign up to testify. And then the other kind of updates I have on things that are moving forward. So we've talked about, and you all recommended, getting the panic defense ban into the legislative agenda. I am in the policy liaison team that Intergovernmental Relations pulls together to draft their legislative agenda each year. So I've presented that proposal. What they said to me was essentially the legislative agenda dictates what the city's lobbyists can and cannot push for. And so they were like, do we need explicit language calling out the panic defense ban, or do we just need the legislative agenda to be structured like we are going to push for things that will benefit trans communities, things that explicitly support trans communities and push against explicitly transphobic legislation? Because apparently that's what the language has looked like in the past. It's been more open, and that has allowed them to support the panic defense ban when it's come up. And my response in the moment was essentially like, you all have been doing this for years. I trust you. If there's any benefit to spelling it out exactly, go for it. If not, if spelling it out explicitly or using the more open language still end up with us being involved in the exact same way, then whatever is fine. But that is where that's at. I'll keep you updated on how that keeps moving forward, but my assumption is it will be on the city's legislative agenda based on how those conversations are going. If anyone has a different opinion than me in response to that question of do we need to spell something out explicitly though, would love to hear that because I can bring that back to them in that case.
I don't think I feel the need to go that specific with it. Trek, I feel like I align with you in your thinking that, the folks doing this work will know it certainly better than I do. So I feel good about that.
Great. I hear
Yes,
that.
same.
Perfect. Okay. I'll keep you posted, but that is moving forward then. And that should be simple, which is good. And then one thing that came up, so a lot of the council offices I talked to asked about okay, which are the little concrete budget asks in here? Particularly because some of these longer term projects council members may not still be in office for, either folks who aren't running again or depending on how elections go, but the budget happens before any of them leave office, regardless. So I've highlighted budget asks to everybody. Those will be things that you all, we should talk through how to keep pushing and keeping on their radar so that when they get to budget markup season in late November, early December, they actually write amendments out of those asks and remember them from a conversation 2 months before, which I would struggle to do if I was a council member with that much information coming my way. But folks seemed generally potentially open there. The other thing that a lot of the council members we talked to highlighted as something they supported, although nobody said oh, I have the capacity to be the person to take this on, was getting the city attorney's office to look into the legality of safe use sites in Minneapolis. Essentially, sites where folks can use drugs in a supervised location, which reduces the risk of overdoses, reduces the risk of just like needles on the street and stuff like that. And also makes it more likely for people to be able to access shelter, since a lot of our shelters are explicitly dry spaces, because it gives them a safe place to use that is not a shelter space. So many offices were interested in that. That particular recommendation is something that came out of one of our trans equity listening sessions last year. Nobody said like, oh yeah, we're gonna take it up and introduce a staff direction. The best thing I can see is if you all wanted to either have folks do this individually or as a whole TEC, like follow up with some of the offices who expressed interest and be like, great, so who's gonna introduce a staff direction? Because that seems like a thing that could move. They were flagging it for me. It was not something I was flagging for them, but is gonna need a push to actually happen.
Do we have a list of the folks that seemed interested in this?
Yeah, so of the folks we've talked to so far, which obviously isn't everybody, the people who called it out were, I'm triple checking my notes so I'm correct on this. Ward 4, Councilmember Cunningham. He very explicitly names that he doesn't have capacity. He didn't just like leave that open-ended, but he is interested and would like probably support it in some way if someone else led.
Gotcha.
From Ward 1, I was talking to Ryan, the council member's staffer, before Councilmember Reich was able to join, and Ryan was like, I'm very interested. I don't actually know if my council member is. I haven't asked him, but I am. So there's something there. I don't know how much, but there's something there. Ward 2, Councilmember Gordon. Yeah, so those three are the ones that have brought it up directly to me so far.
Okay. How would we go about like looping those people in and asking like, hey, who wants to pick this up?
I'll offer a couple ways I think that could look, and also want to hear your all thoughts, because you can brainstorm that too, obviously. I would say, I mean, it could just look like folks who are either current or past constituents or have any relationship with those council members, similarly doing like an email or phone call reach out to be like, hey, I knew you were interested in this when TEC folks met with you about our recommendations. Would you be down to write a staff direction? So kind of that like one-on-one. It could look like the TEC drafting a letter that you send specifically to a couple offices, or something that in any way like comes signed as the whole TEC. And it could also look, if none of you are constituents, hey Galen, we are currently talking about how to nudge all the council offices that are interested in safe use sites, but no one actually wanted to write the staff direction to get someone to write the staff direction, as context. But
awesome.
Yeah, I think
sorry, I'm late.
You're totally good. It is the workday. Things happen. But I think the other thing it could look like, if you wanted to do more one-on-one outreach and nobody like is a constituent or has relationship with them, is to go through your networks and figure out who you know who's in those wards and push like folks, or do that in addition to one-on-one outreach, but kind of push a like folks who aren't on the TEC telling the council members that they're interested in these TEC recommendations and they know these wards might be supportive of that. Curious to hear what other things you think that could look like, but those are three initial possibilities that come to mind.
Okay. And we're still scheduling meetings with the council members that we haven't met with yet. Is that correct?
Post summit, I'm gonna follow up with any council office who hasn't reached out to meet yet and see if they want to. They are not required to in any way, and I think some just won't have capacity at this point in the year, but we're going to try. I'm gonna do that follow-up post summit. Oh, the other one I forgot to say, we didn't get to meet with them this round, but when the TEC last presented recommendations, I know Ward 5 was also interested in safe use sites. So they go on that list as well. Also, multiple councils. Great. Multiple council offices are down either one or both staff right now. So it's like a little chaotic and folks are hard to reach because they have no capacity, is just another piece of context on like trying to meet with them.
Okay, what I'm thinking about right now is I like the idea of like doing a little bit of everything. I think that we should draft a letter, and that would be something that I could help write. And then once we have this letter, I'm thinking if/when we're able to meet with council members, like sitting down and saying like, hey, this is a letter, like, and I'm hand delivering it to you, as opposed to like, you know, just emailing out into the ether. And then, yeah, seeing if somebody is interested in taking that on as a result. Yeah, but so that's what I'm thinking immediately. Of course, I'm down for whatever else. Yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm thinking.
I can definitely support on that post summit. If folks at the general TEC meeting want to go that route.
Yes. Key words post summit.
Give me a week.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we wouldn't decide until after the TEC meeting anyway, so that's fine. Yeah, and I think I would also just recommend, like, for those offices that you've already met with who are interested, if there's not a follow-up meeting, making sure you have a, like, one-on-one email or phone call delivery of that letter that still happens.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have thoughts on this one? Like a great proposal to bring forward to the TEC. And then the other update I wanted to give, so Councilmember Cunningham was, actually both Councilmembers Cunningham and Reich were really excited about the work the Trans Issues Work Group has already been doing around getting like trans equity guidelines attached to our contracts with shelters and other social service orgs, trying to increase regulation, enforce equity is a weird phrase and not the phrase I was aiming for, but like enforce better treatment of trans residents via our funding of those orgs, since that is the only regulatory measure we really have there. Thank you for going through that whirlwind of a sentence with me while I tried to figure out what I was saying. And that is work that's already in progress, kind of in just a like figuring out with the individual contract managers level, but we don't have a good way to institutionalize it because we're not changing the city's entire standard contract, because that also applies to a lot of types of contracts where the specific things we've written up wouldn't be relevant. It would force us to make our requirements much more general in a way that would be counterproductive. And so Councilmember Reich was very interested in being like, okay, yeah, there should definitely be reporting back to council on this at least annually, if not more often, by the staff involved on like how it's going. And procurement, even if we're not changing the overall standard contract, should definitely be in charge of like coordinating that report back to council. Like this still falls, this is in their court. And so he is interested in kind of getting more procurement involvement in that. And his office has already kind of reached out to some staff in procurement just to be like, where's this at? I'm excited, soft nudge. And then Councilmember Cunningham is interested in introducing a staff direction that would essentially just allow for more staff to make this a bigger part of their work plan and devote more time to it, because the staff direction is what shapes staff work plans to a big degree. And is trying to figure out how he can introduce something since he doesn't actually sit on the most relevant committee that it would need to be introduced to. His office is one of the ones that's currently down one council staff. And so his capacity is really limited, and all the council members who are campaigning right now have really limited capacity in general, because that's essentially 2 jobs. But I think Malaysia from Ward 4 has been attending most of the past few TEC meetings since she started at the city, and is like supporting on a lot of the like actual policy drafting work that happens there. So I think this would be a thing that you all could kind of follow up with her about to figure out like, what does she need from the TEC? What are the next steps in making this happen? Make sure the idea made it from Councilmember Cunningham's brain to like his and Malaysia's collective to-do list. And yeah, so that is the only next step that I clearly saw there, was just like, oh, there are council members ready to take this up, figure out how the TEC can support them on taking it up. But that is the other concrete thing that folks are trying to move on. I don't know if folks have like questions or thoughts on that or other things they would want to push from there. Oh, and then actually, that's a lie. There are 1 or 2 more things council members flagged for me that I forgot. Councilmember Schroeder is also interested in that same thing, but was just like, yeah, I need to know more of what the next steps are. Let me know once you have a sense of what the next steps are. And then Councilmember Schroeder and Councilmember Cunningham were both really interested in the like supplier diversity work of getting LGBTQ owned business enterprise into the city's definition of supplier diversity. And the conversation we all had was like, none of us feel clear on the next steps because the position in the mayor's office who would handle this is still vacant. And so my job is just to report back to them once that position is hired for and we are able to meet with whoever the new staff is and they're like onboarded enough that we can start to figure this out together. But that is the other thing that offices are interested in picking up. And we just need to figure out where to move with. So that is actually, I think, now a comprehensive list of what I've got from council offices about what they want to move forward with. And I know the other question, Kenzie, you asked at the beginning was like, what are the things we want to be pushing with the council offices we still haven't met with? And that feels like the other question that's left to solve for. Like, we've named a couple things that council offices are picking up, but are there other things either that we've named that you want to like really make sure are the things we continue to push, or that we haven't named yet that feel like either because they're an easiest win or because they're the highest priority, that they're what we want to push?
Do we have to do any bit of a wait and see until after the election?
For things like the budget that happen before like offices actually change over, the election will tell us basically how much like space people have to do unpopular things because they're not worried because they already lost their reelection bid or not. But it will not change who are the players involved. So yes and not really.
Sorry, I was just pulling up the agenda where I can like see all of your notes track. And I feel like, I mean, if we have the ball rolling, and of course I'm open to what everyone else is thinking, but if we have the ball rolling on a couple of these pieces, like I'm thinking of like the safe use sites and supplier diversity, which already has like piqued the interest of a couple of council members. I think if we like help that along, that seems to be pretty effective, obviously, because, you know, we presented a whole list of recommendations, and the fact that there are council members picking out these few, I feel like we should take those and run with them. So yeah, I guess I don't really know what our next steps would be then. Probably following up with the offices that are interested.
That makes sense. I think the other question I would ask you all is for some of the budget asks, like the money for Minneapolis employment and training to do LGBTQ competency training for all of the like employment orgs that they fund, the like position and regulatory services that would do the property owner training. You're going to need probably realistically to re-push those in front of council over the course of November and very early December in order to make that happen. And the other thing, and there's space to talk this through next month too, but the other thing to start brainstorming is, are there any of those you want to prioritize and or push for all of them and see which get picked up? And like, how do you want to re-push the budget things as we get closer, which again, can be a letter to council, can be some reminder emails, could be some one-on-one meetings, could be getting folks, either TEC members or other community members, to speak at council public testimony, or if people are already planning on speaking, like getting them to add that on to whatever else they were going to speak about, which can be pretty effective because then you don't have to convince someone to speak. You just have to ask them to like add 10 seconds of something. But I think that is the other kind of like open box of next steps. Wow, my metaphors are really bad today to look at.
I think that's a good point about the budget. I mean, just from the meeting with Councilmember Jenkins, like it was very clear to me how much she was like, wait, you want money? Give me details, convince me on this. Like, so I think we're going to have to push pretty hard for anything that requires money to be set aside, especially given all of the different circumstances in the city right now with COVID and everything else that's happening. So, maybe you probably know this a little bit better than I do from like past experience track. How successful have we been in the past of actually getting things that require money to happen? Because if not very successful, then maybe we should focus on just one and like make it a very strong push for just one.
Yeah, great question. I would say the two things the TEC has gotten funded are first getting a part-time temporary staff role for trans equity, and then when that position was not in the proposed budget for the next year, getting a full-time ongoing position so it wouldn't be a fight every year. And that ended up involving a lot of like TEC connecting with other community members and getting more people than just the TEC to testify. But while that's only one thing each year, like a position funding is way more money than like $7,500 for training. So yeah.
In the past, what we have been successful getting funded is you.
Yes, that would be the other way to define what I just said.
That is a success. That is fantastic. But yeah, I was hoping there were some more of these similar sorts of one-offs that we had gotten, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the trans equity work has had the same budget since before the TEC existed. At some point, that budget changed from being one time every year to being ongoing, partially because of the attention the TEC and the trans equity work were getting, but that is not because that was actually like an explicit ask the TEC made. That just actually happened on its own, which was kind of wild. So that's another place that funding has happened, but not like a TEC explicit win to measure.
So from all that, it seems like maybe we should pick, I mean, it seems to me, based on the track record. I'm sorry. I should not have joined the meeting. I apologize. Maybe we should just like pick one thing, since we're maybe not super confident or have a lot of experience making these sorts of things happen. Maybe we should just pick the one that we care about the most and then keep poking at people about it.
That's what I feel like as well.
The one other thing I will say that I forgot to say is that the year that in the budget the TEC won like a full-time ongoing position, they asked explicitly for 2 full-time positions, both because they were like, this actually does take 2 people to staff to the degree we want it, and in an interest of kind of like, if we shoot for here, we'll at least get here. So I would also say like, there's no harm in picking your top 2 and really pushing them, and maybe you'll get both, but it might actually increase the chance that you get 1.
Prime government negotiating tactic. I would like $5 million. Oh, you'll give me $2.5 million? Okay. I only needed 1, but this is great.
The budget asks that I have identified in there that were like obvious to me are the regulatory services training position that allows for the property owner trainings, increasing the trans equity budget and like fully funding the division of race and equity in general. There is not a hard dollar number attached to that because we're still figuring out if we're becoming a department and what that department would hold, so there is no way to attach a dollar number to that. Funding an like admin role in OVP that would give them the capacity to then actually do the other like program management work they want to do that would be a little more specifically trans targeted that they don't have capacity for right now because all their program managers are doing admin. Increasing HR's learning and development money for a like 201 level trans equity training, and the Minneapolis employment and training cultural competency money. Those last 2 that I just named are definitely the cheapest, if that's helpful info also.
So I'm assuming we want a menu of items to ask for, starting with not necessarily free, but definitely a good value for their money. Okay, got it.
I think given that we don't have a dollar amount and there's so much in the air about the division stuff and department, whatever, I feel like it's probably best that we don't try and push too hard on that, because I feel like the lack of detail comes across as like, oh, you figure it out and come back to me sort of situation. So one of the more concrete items that we already have dollar amounts for seems to make sense for me.
I can say that if this is helpful, one thing I've been emphasizing in meeting with council members is the Minneapolis employment and training money and the regulatory services position are the two things where like the work has already started in some form and we know the staff in that office are trying to do the work. And this chunk of money is just the barrier, which could be a useful like talking point and or like priority strategy.
And those are the two that we highlighted with CVP, right? Yeah.
I believe so. All the meetings blend
I think
together.
yeah, I believe those are the ones that we talked about there. I feel like those make sense as like the focus. As far as feasibility being relatively cheap, already having some movement.
Does anyone else have thoughts on that?
I just think if you want to go for the win, or if you want to have like a win category, then definitely go with the things that aren't assigned a dollar amount, and you'll probably get that. And you have shown to be savvy in knowing where to extend the energy to get said item, right? So that's what I would rely on you to tell me which one is probably the best to back.
I appreciate that. I am definitely still figuring it out. I feel like the staff direction about bathrooms that came forward at the council meeting was the moment where I was like, oh, maybe over 2 years in, I like actually figured out how to do this job.
It takes a minute.
But yeah, I think those two could be. It feels really hard to predict the budget this year because we're still in like COVID scarcity budget and also in the weirdness of American Rescue Plan Act funds and also in an election year. And one thing actually that Ward 10 said, which I think was a good point, was like right now in all the conversations and definitely also in the budget conversation, there's going to be a lot of really big council polarization around what are seen as like the biggest conversations, which is going to be primarily policing and public safety is really is rightly so in many ways dominating the entire conversation. And so if there are ways that you all can both like make this a part of that conversation, like, oh, look, as you said in your recommendations, like, here's a place that money can come from. We're giving you a source for it. And or like make sure that that conversation does not drown out other conversations also happening. That there is a way to be like, yep, we will tell you where we stand on this, and we will also tell you other things that are happening. And that can sometimes be when all that council is expecting to hear budget feedback about this year is the police. like that is really what they're listening for and they already know what they're going to hear to some degree, getting even a couple people to talk in an organized way about something else, whether they explicitly connect it to that conversation and say this is where the funding should go from, or whether they say, also, here's a literally $7,500 ask. Like, folks will pay attention because there isn't an organized opposition to it, and because it's just not the conversation they were already expecting and that is already predictable. Predictable is a weird word, but also, like, if you've listened to the public hearings of the budget over the last few years, it's true in some ways. So, I don't know. I don't have a full answer, but those are some of the senses I have. And it is definitely possible. I know 2 years ago, the TEC worked with a lot of folks who were already planning on testifying around defunding to be like, can you say defund and fund the trans equity work? And that would kind of catch council by surprise to see those two like separate organizing conversations clearly actually being in coordination. And I think, yeah, is a way to move any of this as well. Do folks have, I know we're just about at time, do folks have other thoughts, questions, ideas, or does this leave us with a good place to report back to TEC in October? Hearing none, is there anyone who wants to be the person to report back to the TEC in October? I will obviously send out minutes, so you'll have those for reference. If no one says anything, Kenzie, as the co-chair, it probably falls a little bit to you if you would feel open to that.
I can if I have to, but I don't always want to be the one talking in our meetings. So that's why I am trying to give space for other people.
Okay, Kenzie, I love the sound of your voice. Talk right on. And second thing is, I'm not sure I can make October, but I'm willing to do November. That's the only, in all honesty, I'm not sure I can do October, but I can make November.
Love it.
I feel like given the fact that I missed the first 30 minutes of our meeting, I probably would not be the best person to report out on what we discussed today, but I am happy to contribute.
That works. Well, we are over on time, and I don't want to let you get to the rest of your days. So maybe Kenzie and Galen, if you're able to kind of share that a little bit, and Galen, you can speak to the pieces you were here for, and not what you weren't.
Makes sense.
And I will send out notes. I just need a motion to adjourn if you all feel good to wrap up.
Oh, I can do that. May move to adjourn.
Great. And a second.
Seconded.
Awesome. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.